So today we reviewed The Hobbit An Unexpected Journey. It was released December 14th and stars Richard Armitage, Ian McKellen, Martin Freeman, Cate Blanchett, and many, many others.
So, for the record, we have yet to see the 48 frames per second version.
Yeah.
But
as you know, I was really looking forward to this movie. For a good few years, I was looking forward to this movie.
You did open a Facebook group about it a year ago.
I would like to say, though, before we get on too much of a negative tone for all the Lord of the Rings fans, that this movie did give a very good account of the story of Middle-earth. Although the first scenes did allude to a lot of, sort of make many references to the original trilogy, it did also sort of start off in its new direction. It wasn't really trying to cling to the success of the previous films.
Yeah. I mean, it holds its own. It's definitely a different film, you know?
But worse. A worse film.
A worse film, arguably. Some people think it's better. The first 40 minutes of this film I loved. I was, really into it. I loved how they set it up. And as opposed to what a lot of other critics say, I really didn't think it took too long to get going. For me, it went by extremely quickly. I think it was the overindulgence of CGI that kind of pulled me out a little bit. I think, for example, there's this whole subplot that they threw in there with Azog, kind of an albino orc, which, first of all, didn't need to be CGI whatsoever. And if it was CGI, make it as effective as they did with Gollum. Because it wasn't. It was weird. It was like watching a video game character and then watching something as hyper-realistic as Gollum. And it was like, why couldn't you do what you did on Gollum so incredibly well on this guy? But that being said, the wargs looked great.
I mean, honestly, visually, the movie was pretty amazing.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah.
And we saw
especially
it
in IMAX in 3D. It was pretty fucking insane. That screen was 100 feet tall.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Well, let's start talking about the main problems that you guys had with the movie.
Yeah, see, I don't want to talk too much shit on the movie. I
want to talk some shit on it.
I know. Okay.
All right, well, Rob wants to talk shit, but...
All right, talk some shit.
Okay, well, for me, you were saying, and I think we've discussed this, that the first 40 minutes were your favorite part, and I agree because those were before it got going.
Yeah.
And some people say, it takes 40 minutes to get going. As soon as it got going, I think it went to shit.
Yeah.
Because there was so much action that it was one thing where they were fighting wargs, and then, as soon as they were done, they'd be fighting orcs, and then they'd be falling, and it was just action scene after action scene. None of that, slow, epic feel that was part of the original.
But you know why, though? Because they don't have very much story to go on.
Yeah.
It's not there. And that's why this movie would have benefited so much by being 40 minutes shorter. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes would have been perfect for this film.
Yeah.
And one of the big action scenes was also one of the most disappointing, in my opinion. The Goblin Caves.
Oh, yeah.
And it was frustrating because you also, during the exact same time, simultaneously, it would switch to the best scene in the film, which was the Riddles in the Dark scene with Gollum and Bilbo. And that was an incredible scene. And I dare say that it was better than any other scene we've seen of Gollum in the original trilogy.
And I think that was a good scene because it was one of the scenes that actually took you slow the fuck down.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just action.
Finally a little break.
It was some dialogue and some drama instead of just fighting.
Exactly. Some drama. And some tension.
I feel the main problem with the action was that it sort of took on a completely different tone than the third movies that were sort of dramatic and despairing and depressing. And they sort of made it upbeat and sort of hokey, these fat little dwarves running around, knocking off
which is
orcs
stupid
left
because
and right.
You can still have a more lighthearted story while still keeping the action brutal and swift and realistic. You know, you don't need the action doesn't need to be hokey for the story to be lighter.
Compared to the scene of the Mines of Moria from the Fellowship of the Ring, is what it could have possibly.
Had the potential to be.
Had the potential
and then they
deliver that kind of scene, but they sort of threw it away in exchange for some sort of slapstick action.
Roller coaster kind of theme. It looked like a theme park.
Exactly. Here's
like Pirates of the Caribbean. So
that
reminded
scene,
me of.
Yeah, it was so much falling. It reminded me honestly of Super Monkey Ball, pinball, gumball machine. But it was just so much falling and rolling around, and I think it was
scripted. It felt incredibly scripted.
It felt very scripted. And I think a lot of it was the fact that they used so much CGI, he could do a lot of bullshit that he like couldn't have done in the first movie.
Right.
I think it did its job in that it introduced the Hobbit series, which is now, as you know, going to be a trilogy. The ending was a little bit of... The ending sort of came out of the blue, was a little bit unexpected, and was clearly just supposed to be a build-up to the next two movies.
Right.
So standing alone, it was not meant to be a work of art, just like The Fellowship of the Ring. But
yeah,
I agree
exactly.
that they could have done much better.
But I did like the last scene in the film, where as soon as they leave the Goblin Caves and they're there on that cliff, I like that scene. Like that kind of... I was like, okay, this is at least decent, you know?
I thought it came too soon after the Goblin Caves, though.
Yeah.
It was all of 30 seconds rest in between.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, exactly.
One action scene where you were almost laughing at these dwarves knocking over orcs, to the next scene where you're supposed to be holding your seat in apprehension, scared for the lives of these dwarves.
But you're not,
and
though.
It's sort of a jarring shift.
But yeah, you're not. I guess you don't really care that much about the dwarves because there's not much character development at all.
No.
There's too many to keep track of. It's like
around.
herding cats. One of them's fat.
Yeah.
One of them's old. One of them's the king. The rest are just dwarves.
Hopefully they'll be fleshed out more in the further two installments, but it's still inexcusable that they weren't in the first one. They just need to have tangible personalities that we can relate to and see. Like, each one has a unique personality. Instead, what Peter Jackson does is gives them each different beards and different hats and hopes you remember them. But there's still some superb acting, though. The acting is great.
I think Bilbo had an amazing performance. I was really pleased. I really liked his character.
Martin
I think he was carrying a lot of the movie.
He was.
He sort of like he added a new sort of dimension to Hobbits, whereas the trilogy either showed you the sort of despairing face of Frodo or the sort of overly cheerful Hobbit-like behavior of Merry and Pippin. Yeah, Bilbo was a lot more complex, and he had a lot of depth to him.
Yeah.
The character development for him throughout the film was pretty spot on.
Yeah.
So good for them for doing that, because that was arguably the most important, thing to get right.
Yeah.
In the film. I was actually very curious to see Barry Humphries play the Goblin King. Huge disappointment. He has 15 lines. He doesn't really say very much, and he just dies instantaneously and makes a joke about it when he dies. When he dies, no. Could you
Yeah, I mean that was part of the really childish things that was in the movie.
And fine, he's trying to appeal to another audience, but me, as a person, as a human being, as a fan.
Childhood largely grounded in Lord of the Rings.
Exactly. I was like, hey, Peter Jackson, man. I was like, I was like 10 when I saw the Lord of the Rings. I ate that shit up. You didn't need to do it like this for it to have been appealing to me. You know?
Yeah.
I know I'm not actually talking to Peter Jackson. I'm sorry, but I'm looking at my mic and
for all our Peter Jackson.
I'm like, dude, Peter Jackson, come on, man, you fucked up. Richard Armitage, good acting, and I hear people saying that he's like the Viggo Mortensen of this film, like he's like that badass or whatever. I have yet to see him do something actually stand out.
Right.
Badass.
Yeah.
And also, not to mention, though, he acts like a total asshole throughout the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, you understand that he has anger and frustration within him, but he's such a dick to Bilbo that it's just, you hate him, kind of. I at least, no, that was
maybe
that
the
was
last
for me.
30 seconds.
Exactly. And, throughout the film, I was like, why are you being so mean to him?
Where there was another jarring change.
Yeah.
He's putting his life on the line for you for basically no reason.
Exactly. And it's why are you treating him like shit right now? You're kind of a dick.
That's fair. If they want to make him look like a dick and then make him nice guy later on, whatever.
I guess you felt invested in Thorin because he had a backstory.
Yeah. You felt bad for him. It gave you a backstory so that you could understand the dwarves and their position and what they were trying to do.
Right. So that was good. And those flashback action scenes was the best action in the movie. Yeah. I was like, that's awesome. This is the shit. And that was all in the first 40 minutes. So that's why I say the first 40 minutes is the best. Because those first 40 minutes, I was like, he's doing this right. Yeah. This is really good.
Yeah.
When they're when it shows the flashback battle and they're the orcs are throwing the dwarves off the cliff or whatever.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That was so cool. Come on. I know, I'm serious, though.
For all our dwarf listeners, please don't take offense. Just a little bit racist here.
All those dwarves dying and being thrown up. But no, it was a visual, visceral experience. But then when you get to the actual action scenes of the current time in the film, with the dwarves, it's kind of more hokey and, like, goofy, and it pulls you out of it, I think. Because you're watching CG characters fight other CG characters.
I feel like you made an interesting point about how you can totally tell that there's no contact between, like, their sword and, like, actually hitting this other person.
It's possible that I'm the only one who didn't notice that because I saw it in a regular theater rather than IMAX 3D.
And it wasn't as clear.
So a lot of build-up for The Hobbit. Maybe a little disappointment, but who's excited for the next installment?
I am excited.
Are you optimistic for the future?
Yes, I want to be.
All right.
I think I am optimistic. I think it will get improved.
Yeah, I think it'll be better.
I have spoken to some pretty hardcore Lord of the Rings fans who are not altogether displeased with the movie, but they were looking at it from a purely, like, Lord of the Rings, like, cult following. They were just sort of looking at it as,
why?
Is it telling the story of The Hobbit? They weren't as preoccupied with the CGI.
Of course, it's telling the story of The Hobbit, but too much because it makes stuff up for it to fill stuff. It has so much filler. That's just needless. For example, the Stone Giant scene, visually, awesome. Why is it there? No reason.
Because it wasn't that cool of a scene, really.
No, I thought
it was cool.
I thought it was cool.
It looked cool.
It
but
looked
it was
sick.
Sort of out of place, or, like, didn't really have a purpose.
I mean, it was effing random.
Yeah.
It was so random. It was like, Rivendell, the elves, yay! Storm, trekking on the side of a cliff. Fucking stone jump, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like,
I feel like it would have been better.
That's a pacing thing. And that could have been cut and just put into the extended edition. If I saw that in the extended edition, I would have been like, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think it would have been better if they just done it the way that you said they did it in the book.
Right.
They see it off in the distance, some fucking giants fighting, cool.
Yeah.
And then that would just be like one of those slower moments instead of like some stupid action.
I know, it would have actually been kind of beautiful or cool if they were just like walking along, like talking, having some sort of like substance in the dialogue, and seeing that from far away and like talking about it.
Yeah.
And being like, and Bilbo being like, "What's that?" Or like, "What are they doing?" And then you that would capture more, that you would have a time to take a breath and capture that sense of awe that the Lord of the Rings did so well.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I want to see it again. I really do.
Yeah.
I really do. And I feel. What are you laughing at, you asshole?
You're just like, you refuse to give it such a low score because it'll just hurt you more, dude. Just do it.
No, I would refrain. I think that part of the reason you're so tempted to give it a low score is because you're comparing it so much to the trilogy.
But I'm not comparing it to the trilogy. There was just stuff in there that was stupid. The pacing was poor. There was not enough character development among the dwarves. A lot of them became backdrops. Some of the CGI fell totally flat. There was a few great scenes, and then there were terrible scenes. There were okay scenes, but it was mostly...
I think the stuff that happened...
No, but let me finish. It was mostly great.
Rivendell would be the definition of okay.
Yeah.
What?
Rivendell.
What happened in Rivendell? Having, like, the Dark Lord Saruman walk in and start making jokes
my God.
Was sort of off.
And the Dol Guldur part... And he's not a Dark Lord in this film.
Yeah, I know he's not. Exactly.
That's how they portray him, though.
You're supposed to... But the thing is... He knows that you know, and he's making a point that he's not evil, but he overdoes it, I think.
Yeah, I think that was bad, though.
No, he doesn't come off as evil to me.
Yes, he does.
No, he doesn't.
He comes off as, like, you all know that this guy's a villain.
He comes off as a serious...
He comes off as someone, to me...
Maybe a little bit of foreshadowing.
To me, he comes off as someone who... And let's keep in mind that 60 years, relatively, that's a pretty short period of time between the two.
Yeah.
So he could be already, on his way there.
Yeah, I mean, it would already be like in cahoots with fucking Sauron.
It seems like he is. It doesn't seem like he's evil to me in it blatantly. It seems more like he's disagreeing with Gandalf because he doesn't want to agree with